Welcome back. All right, so we're going to solve this one. 50x squared minus 46x equals 4. All right, so first let's rewrite this in standard form. We're going to have to subtract 4 from both sides. Right, to move everything to one side. All right, so now we have, I wonder if I'll get rid of that box anytime soon. Probably not. We have 50x squared minus 46x minus 4 equals 0. All right, so now we look at those. Now you don't want to necessarily just multiply a times c together without checking out your numbers here. So we've got 50 and a 46 and a negative 4. Well, I notice they're all divisible by 2. We have a greatest common factor. Right? So we should get rid of the greatest common factor because it will give us something smaller to work with. Right? So this, by the way, was step number 1. We put it in standard form. And the steps are off to the side there. Step number 2, we're going to factor out our greatest common factor. So we'll factor out the 2. Now we've got 50 divided by 2 is usually 25. So now we have 50x squared divided by 2 is 25x squared. Negative 46x divided by 2 is a negative 23x. And negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2. And so, by the way, the equation was no longer here. So I had to figure out what it was. And it works out just fine, except I need to fix the numbers on this side here. So they match what I just wrote down. All right, so we have, we've pulled out our greatest common factor. And now we can do step 3. So let's just call this step 2. And now we have step 3 here. We can just divide both sides by 2. And so that 2 cancels. And 0 divided by 2 is still 0. So now we've got 25x squared minus 23x minus 2 equals 0. All right, so now we have something smaller to work with. All right, so our A is 25. So always you want to factor out greatest common factors first, and then if you're solving, divide by that value. If you're not solving, you're just factoring, you need to include that as part of the factored expression. But if we're solving, we can get rid of it by dividing both sides by the same thing. All right, so A is 25, B is negative 23, and C is negative 2. So 25 times negative 2, right, would be negative 50, right? So this right here is our A times C, right? So I'm going to get rid of this, right, and rewrite that there, right? So we're going to multiply the A times C, right? So that would be 25 times negative 2. Right, and so that gives us negative 50. Right, so we need two numbers that multiply to give us negative 50, and then add to give us, so this here was A times C, and add to give us our B term. B was negative 23. Right, so that's going to be a negative 25, right, and a positive 2. Oops, sorry, the other way around. Yeah, yes, that would be correct. So I had to kind of take my steps off to the side and remember what equation was up here. All right, so negative 25 times 2 gives us a negative 50. Negative 25 plus 2 gives us a negative 23. That matches the equation we have up here. All right, so we're going to replace that. We're going to keep the first term, right? And right now we're factor by grouping. So let's change colors. Make it color coordinated. So step 4, we're doing the factor by grouping. All right, so remember we keep the first term, 25x squared, right? And then we replace the negative 23x with a negative 25x and a positive 2x, and we keep the negative 2. And the first two are a group, and the second two are a group. All right, so, and now we can just factor. Greatest common factor for 25x squared and negative 25x, well, that would be 25x. We can factor out a 25x. And 25x squared divided by 25x is x. Negative 25x divided by 25x is a negative 1. Greatest common factor for 2x and negative 2 is a positive 2. 2x divided by 2 is x. Negative 2 divided by 2 is a negative 1. Right? So now what we pulled out is one factor, right? 25x plus 2. And the repeating x minus 1 is the other. And somehow I lost my 0 a while ago. Let's put it back. Now we just set each of our factors equal to 0. And we solve. We're applying we're applying the zero product rule. Right? So 25x plus 2 equals 0. We'll subtract 2 from both sides. 25x equals negative 2. And then divide by 25. X is negative 2 25ths. That's one solution. And the other one's nice and easy. X minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 to both sides. X is 1. So those are our two solutions, negative 2 25ths and 1. And if you plugged them back in, you would indeed get 0 equals 0. Right? So there's one more example for us. Let's do the last problem, which is a word problem. Right? By the way, I like doing this one because there's some problems in your homework like this where it has a greatest common factor. You should factor that out first and then divide by that greatest common factor and then divide the rest. If you're just factoring, remember, don't cancel it. It's not an equation. You don't have an other side to cancel it with. Only when it's an equation. All right, so here, let's solve this one. You have all of this in your notes. We want to solve the problem now that we have an equation. So the equation y equals 5x squared minus 60x meters models the dolphin's jump out of the water. Determine after how many seconds after leaving the water does it take for the dolphin to land in the water again. Excuse me. My voice is getting all funny there. All right, so remember the height when it leaves the water and it returns to the water is 0 feet. Right? That's the height of the water. Right? So when we're solving, we have this equation here. Our first step, number 1, is going to be replace y with 0. Right? So here's our equation. Right? So step 1, we have 0 equals 5x squared minus 60x. Step 2, we're going to use greatest common factor. There's no constant term. What's the greatest common factor? The largest term that divides evenly into 5x squared and negative 60x. Well, they're both divisible by 5, and they're both divisible by x. So we're going to factor out a 5x. All right, so this is 2 and 3 together here. We have 0 equals, we're factoring out the 5x. So 5x squared divided by 5x is an x. Negative 60x divided by 5x is going to be negative 12. And then we're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. I'm kind of running out of space, and I have a lot of I have space under step 4. So step 4 is just going to go right here where there's some space. So we set our factors equal to 0. So 5x equals 0. Divide both sides by 5. Well, x is 0. And so that first solution, that's when he leaves the water. Well, I thought I had enough space. Maybe not. All right, so now let's find, actually, maybe I should just put step 4 over here. Because I have more space over here. We'll just erase this. I'll put that back, 0 feet. All right, and it doesn't take us very long to solve it because it was, hey, where's my writing? Oh, I made the mistake of picking up the black pen before the blue continued or finished writing. Come on, go away, go away. There we go. 0 feet. And there we go. Now I can put the blue pen down. All right, so our step 4, let's do it over here. We have 5x equal to 0, and we just divide both sides by 5, x is 0. So this is when dolphin leaves the water. Right? When no time went by, he left the water. All right? So it was 0 feet, and it's also 0 seconds. I was looking for the unit of measure. Right? So technically that'd be like the point 0, 0. Right? So the 0 feet is the y, is the 0 seconds, because we're solving for time here. We're solving for the x. We'll set the other factor equal to 0. So we have x minus 12. We add 12 to both sides. X is 12. Right? So he returns to the water. Right? So so y here is 0 feet. X is 12 seconds. So again, at 12 seconds, he's at 0 feet. Our question was, how long, how many seconds, right? How many seconds after leaving the water does it take for the dolphin to land in the water again? Well, our answer to that is just what we found right here. Right? 12, where's my line? There it is. 12 seconds. And that would be our, I don't think we need the S. We know it's plural 12 seconds. Nobody would say 12 sec, but I don't think we need to do that for the units. 12 sec or seconds. And that's our answer, right? I believe it's the last one in the last problem in your notes. I believe this is the last problem before we get to a classwork, but I do have a summary. And this is in your notes. Yep, and then we have a classwork, a solving classwork. And I'll give you a set, so don't do all 4 sets. I'll give you a matter of fact, this is going to be your set. Whatever your set was for the first classwork, that's your set for the second classwork. Nice and simple. So if you did set 1 before, do set 1 again. Did set 2 before, do set 2 again, and so forth. All right, so this is in your notes, and it kind of sums up what was on that first page that wasn't in your notes. That first page, that was the first podcast for the solving quadratic equations. So number 1, we're going to factor out the GCF, the greatest common factor if possible. We're going to use factor by grouping to find the 2 binomial terms. Right? So we are going to identify A, B, and C and multiply A times C. We identify 2 numbers whose product is A times C and whose sum is B. We rewrite the middle term, Bx, as the sum of the numbers we found in step 2. The first 2 become a group, the second 2 become a group. Right? This is all your factoring. You'll pull out a common factor from each pair of terms. One factor is the 2 terms you pulled out, and the second factor is the repeating terms. And by the way, it doesn't matter which way you write it. You can check your factorization by multiplication. That's an optional step. I don't require a check, but if you're not sure, I must be getting tired. That looks really sloppy. If you're not sure, go ahead and do that one. Let's add one thing to this, all right, and that is to solve. All right, so for solving, you just have to do one other thing, and that is set each factor equal to 0 and solve for whatever your variable is. For x, we'll just put x, and you know that's if your variable is a t, you're solving for t. All right, so this is our summary of factoring trinomials. All right, so we had factor by grouping. Let's just add one thing. If there's no constant, just as a reminder, factor out the GCF. You won't be able to do factor by grouping, or it's not very practical to do factor by grouping. And there's no reason to do factor by grouping if you have no constant term. Instead, just factor out the greatest common factor, and that's it. That's your 2 factors. All right? So that's the end of this podcast. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Oh, and in our next Nearpod lesson, we're going to learn other ways to solve. Factoring is the way you want to use when an equation or a quadratic equation or quadratic expression is factorable. But what if we want to solve an equation and it's not factorable? We're going to have to learn some new tools. All right, so that'll be coming up in the next couple Nearpods, more tools for solving quadratic equations. All right, thanks for watching. Bye for now.